The rain came down in cold, relentless sheets over Willow Creek Road, drenching the last of the moving boxes stacked beside a fading blue pickup. Laura Whitman, 42, stood motionless in the downpour, her coat clinging to her slender frame, auburn hair plastered against her pale face. Beside her, Lily and Noah, both 11, huddled close beneath a frayed umbrella that offered little protection from the storm, or from the moment that was breaking their world apart. From the porch of the Grand Whitman estate, Evelyn Whitman, elegant in her beige trench coat and pearl earrings, watched with a face carved from marble. Her voice, calm but merciless, cut through the rain like a blade. "You've had your time here, Laura. It's time to move on." At her feet, Max, the family's aging German shepherd, let out a low growl, not of anger, but of mourning, as if even he understood that home was no longer theirs. Have you ever stood in the storm of your own life, realizing that love, safety, everything you believed permanent, can vanish in a heartbeat? Where are you listening from today? Chapter 1. The Storm and the Goodbye. Rain hammered against the stone driveway of the Whitman estate, a relentless symphony that blurred the world into silver and sorrow. Laura Whitman stood in the downpour, unmoving, her coat clinging to her slender frame as if trying to anchor her against the wind. At 42, Laura possessed a quiet, enduring beauty. Soft auburn hair now plastered to her cheeks, pale skin marked by fatigue and faint freckles that once glowed in sunlight. Her gray eyes, sharp yet kind, were dulled by exhaustion, the kind of eyes that had spent years reading pain in animals and hope in people. She had once been Dr. Laura Whitman, the beloved veterinarian of Asheville, known for her gentle voice and steady hands. Now, she was simply the widow of Daniel Whitman, gone at 45, taken by a heart attack that struck like lightning, sudden and merciless. Their twins, Lily and Noah, stood at her sides, each gripping a handle of the small suitcase between them. Lily, with her father's dark curls and sensitive eyes, trembled silently. Noah, freckled and wiry, clenched his jaw in stubborn imitation of the man he'd barely begun to resemble. Max, their 11-year-old German shepherd, pressed close to them, his thick sable coat soaked, his intelligent amber eyes fixed on the open doorway of the house. Once a rescue dog from Laura's clinic, Max had grown gray around the muzzle, but still held the posture of a soldier, broad-shouldered, vigilant, loyal to the bone. He had slept beside Daniel's hospital bed every night until the final breath, and since then had rarely let the children out of sight. In the doorway stood Evelyn Whitman, a woman whose beauty had long since sharpened into something metallic. Her silver hair was immaculate, swept into a chignon that defied the humidity. The pearls around her neck gleamed against a tailored navy suit, untouched by rain. Her face bore the unyielding confidence of someone who had never been questioned, never told no. Evelyn's voice cut through the storm like the edge of a blade. "The car is waiting, Laura. There's no reason to make this more unpleasant than it has to be." Laura's fingers tightened on Max's leash. "Unpleasant?" she repeated softly, her voice nearly lost to the wind. "You're evicting your grandchildren." Evelyn's gaze didn't waver. "I'm preserving what Daniel built. The estate belongs to the Whitman Trust, and your contributions, however noble, were temporary." The words landed like stones, and Laura felt something hollow inside her shift, the last fragile remnant of belonging collapsing under their weight. Behind Evelyn, men in raincoats carried boxes down the steps, loading them into a moving truck that hissed against the flooded curb. Years of life reduced to damp cardboard. From across the street, behind the curtain of his porch, an old man watched quietly. Mr. Samuels, the retired postman who had lived next door since before Laura married into the Whitmans. His once broad frame had bent with age, but his eyes remained sharp, seeing everything and saying little. He had always liked Laura, had seen the kindness in her that the Whitmans pretended not to notice. As thunder rolled over the valley, he reached into his coat pocket and fingered a folded envelope, its surface smudged with rain and ink. On it, one word: "For Laura." Laura knelt to adjust Lily's hood, her hands trembling slightly. "We'll be all right," she whispered, more a prayer than a promise. Noah stared at the house, jaw set. "Dad built that roof," he muttered. "He made it strong." "I know," Laura said, forcing a smile. "That's why we'll build another one, even stronger." Evelyn's sigh carried both irritation and pity. "There's no need for dramatics, Laura. The children can stay with me at the main estate. You'll have time to figure yourself out." "No, The word was quiet but immovable. Laura rose slowly, her soaked hair clinging to her neck. They stay with me, wherever I go. Evelyn's perfectly painted lips twitched. On a vet's salary? In that wit, I suppose you'll find the world less forgiving than your patients. She turned toward the door, dismissing them with the finality of a judge's gavel. The rain intensified as Laura stepped off the porch, her boots sinking into the mud. Max moved ahead, tail low, body protective. The twins followed, each step splashing through the shallow flood pooling on the driveway. Laura's hand brushed against the wooden box tucked beneath her coat, the only thing she had insisted on keeping. The grain was worn smooth, engraved with Daniel's handwriting, open when the road grows foggy. As they reached the end of the drive, headlights flashed. A yellowed sedan pulled up beside them. The window rolled down to reveal Mr. Samuels, his weathered face lined by years of wind and kindness. "Get in, Laura," he called. "You shouldn't walk in this storm." Laura hesitated. "We'll be fine, Mr. Samuels, really." He leaned across the seat, his voice low, conspiratorial. "Maybe, but Daniel once told me, if this day ever came, I should give you something." From the glove compartment, he pulled out the rain-spotted envelope. "He said it would lead you to where you're supposed to go." Laura stared at the envelope, heart pounding. "What do you mean?" The old man smiled faintly. "I suppose that's for you to find out." Lightning split the sky behind the estate, illuminating Evelyn's silhouette framed in the doorway, elegant, unbending, watching them disappear. Laura took the envelope, its paper soft and heavy from the rain. On the front, in Daniel's familiar script, were two words she didn't understand. Willow Creek. She looked up, but the sedan was already pulling away, leaving ripples in the puddles and a question burning in her mind. What had Daniel known that she didn't? Chapter 2. The Cabin at Willow Creek. The road to Willow Creek wound through mist and memory, a serpentine ribbon of cracked asphalt, flanked by forests dense enough to swallow sound. Laura drove in silence, the wipers beating a rhythmic lament across the windshield. Lily and Noah sat in the back seat, heads leaning together, lulled by the steady hum of rain against the roof. Max lay curled at their feet, his grizzled fur-damp, nose twitching every time the car jolted. In her lap, the envelope from Mr. Samuels rested like a sleeping truth. 2 hours from Asheville, the forest thinned and opened onto a narrow clearing. There, crouched beneath a veil of willow branches and fog, stood a small wooden cabin. Its paint had long since surrendered to weather, leaving only faded streaks of green and gray. One shutter hung askew, and the porch sagged under the weight of years. Yet despite its neglect, there was something almost tender in the way it leaned toward the stream, as though listening to the water's whisper. Laura parked and stepped out. The air was thick with the scent of wet pine and old earth. "This must be it," she murmured, half in disbelief. Noah jumped out after her, surveying the cabin like a general assessing a battlefield. "It's kinda small," he said. "It's ours," Laura replied, forcing warmth into her voice. Lily emerged quietly, clutching Max's leash. The old shepherd bounded ahead, tail high, his paws leaving dark prints on the porch. Inside, the cabin smelled of dust, turpentine, and forgotten dreams. Canvases leaned against the walls, half-finished paintings of forests, faces, and rivers frozen in motion. A wooden easel stood by the window, its surface splattered with colors that had long dried. "She lived alone?" Lily asked. Laura nodded. "Your Aunt May, my mother's sister, she was different." Aunt May had been the family eccentric, a painter who wore overalls to church and once dyed her hair violet for a summer because it matched the sky. Laura hadn't seen her in years before she passed, yet, somehow, walking through the cabin, she could feel the woman's spirit lingering, wild, unbent, curious. In the back room, Laura found a rusted wood stove, a table stacked with sketchbooks, and a small trunk. Inside were letters, dozens of them, written in Aunt May's looping script but never mailed. Most were addressed to Daniel W. Her breath caught. Daniel had never mentioned writing to May. She pulled one out and read the first line. "If they won't fund the project, we'll build it ourselves. The children deserve more than pity. They deserve a place to dream." "Mom?" Noah's voice echoed from the hallway. "You need to see this." She followed him to the sitting room, where Max stood pawing at a loose panel in the wall. The dog barked once, insistent. Laura knelt, pried at the wood, and found a yellowed envelope wedged in the gap. Her Husband's handwriting, neat but fading, scrawled across it, "For May, in case I can't finish." Inside was a folded sketch, Daniel's unmistakable lines depicting a building shaped like open hands. Beneath it, a few words in pencil. "The Haven, for those who have none." Laura's fingers trembled. The edges of the paper were soft from time, the ink smudged but legible. Her husband had been planning something he had never told her. As she sat with the letter, the sound of an engine approached. She turned toward the window. A red pickup truck rumbled to a stop near the gate. From it stepped a tall man in his late 30s, broad-shouldered, his flannel shirt rolled to the elbows, revealing forearms scarred from burns. His hair was dark and unkempt, streaked faintly with gray at the temples. The way he moved, cautious yet purposeful, suggested someone accustomed to danger and silence. "Afternoon," he called, his voice deep, with a rasp like gravel smoothed by rain. "Didn't mean to startle you. Saw the lights on. No one's lived here in years." Laura straightened, brushing dust from her jeans. "We just arrived. I'm Laura Whitman. My aunt owned this place." The man nodded. "Ethan Brooks, lived down the road, used to be with Asheville Fire Department until the shoulder gave out." He gestured vaguely to a stiffness in his left arm. "Now I fix things, mostly. Roofs, fences, people's faith in gravity." A wry smile flickered across his lips. Lily peeked out from behind Laura, Max standing protectively in front of her. "He's friendly," Ethan said, crouching slightly, keeping a respectful distance. "Old shepherd, right? 11? I had one once, named Duke. Best partner I ever had on the rescue team." Laura softened a little. "This is Max. He doesn't trust easy." "Good. Neither do I." Ethan's eyes, a stormy blue, met hers with quiet understanding, the kind that recognized loss without needing explanation. By dusk, he was on the roof, hammering loose shingles, while Noah handed him nails with solemn concentration. Lily followed Max around the garden, pulling weeds and humming softly. The creek glimmered in the fading light, and for the first time since Daniel's death, the air around Laura felt breathable. Inside, she sorted through Aunt May's things: jars of paintbrushes, sketches of animals, a photograph of Daniel and May standing beside an easel. He looked younger, smiling, his hand on May's shoulder. On the back, in May's handwriting, "The dream begins here." That night, after the children fell asleep on mattresses laid across the floor, Laura sat alone by the window, the letter still in her hand. The cabin creaked around her, whispering old stories. Outside, Ethan's lantern flickered in his yard, a steady glow in the darkness. She glanced at Max, who lifted his head, ears pricked, eyes alert to something unseen beyond the trees. He growled. Low, almost questioning, Laura turned toward the creek. There, in the reflection of the water, a faint light shimmered under the surface, pulsing like a heartbeat. When she looked again, it was gone. Chapter 3. The Hidden Plans. The storm arrived like an uninvited memory. Rain came first, fine and hesitant, then heavier, beating against the cabin roof until the old shingles moaned in protest. The wind threaded through the trees, whistling a mournful tune. Laura stood by the window, watching the world dissolve into a blur of gray and trembling branches. Max sat by her feet, restless, ears twitching at every thunderclap. 11 years old, his joints were stiff, but his instincts remained sharp as ever. He seemed to sense the unease that crept through the house. Noah and Lily were asleep in their small loft, wrapped in mismatched quilts. Laura moved through the dimly lit living room, checking the candles she'd placed in saucers. The power had gone out an hour earlier. Ethan had stopped by before the rain started, dropping off sandbags and a flashlight. "Creek's rising fast," he'd warned, rain dripping from the brim of his old canvas hat. "If the water comes too close, head for higher ground." He'd smiled faintly then, an expression that softened the rugged lines of his face. His jaw was dark with stubble, his blue eyes steady and protective. But behind that calm, Laura sensed the weight of a man who had seen too much fire, too much loss, and now lived cautiously, afraid of both danger and attachment. Lightning split the sky, lighting up the cabin for a heartbeat. The roof groaned. Somewhere above, a beam cracked. Max barked, sharp and urgent. Laura grabbed a lantern. "What is it, boy?" The dog ran toward the kitchen, claws skidding on the wooden floor, then stopped at the trapdoor she hadn't noticed before, half hidden beneath an old rug. He barked again, a low, commanding sound that stirred something primal in her chest. Rain pounded harder. Laura knelt, pulled at the handle, and lifted the hatch. A breath of cold, damp air rose from the darkness. The lantern's glow revealed a narrow staircase descending into what looked like a cellar. Max went first, cautious but determined, his tail rigid. Laura followed, clutching the lantern, the light trembling with each step. The basement smelled of earth and mildew. Boxes were stacked against stone walls, and cobwebs hung like lace from the beams. But something gleamed near the far corner, a large metal cabinet half covered by a paint-stained tarp. Laura pulled it open. Inside were blueprints rolled and bound with twine, their edges frayed from time. She set one on the work table and unrolled it carefully. It was a design, intricate, detailed, a building drawn with Daniel's unmistakable precision. The title read, Whitman Haven, Community Arts and Learning Center. Rooms labeled Studio A, Library Wing, Children's Garden. Her breath caught. Beneath Daniel's signature was another, written in neat, elegant cursive, Evelyn Whitman. And below it, scrawled in red pencil, a note. Funding withdrawn, not profitable. Laura's eyes blurred. The paper smelled faintly of her husband's cologne, cedar and something faintly citrus, like sunlight on old wood. He had dreamed of this place, she realized, a sanctuary for those forgotten by privilege. And Evelyn, his own mother, had refused him, branding compassion as failure. The truth rippled through her like lightning. Daniel's alienation from the Whitman family hadn't been rebellion. It had been conviction. He had chosen principle over profit, and paid for it in silence. Thunder boomed, rattling the foundation. Water dripped from the ceiling, running down the blueprints in tiny rivulets. Laura clutched the plans to her chest, whispering, "I'll finish it for you." The next morning, the storm had passed. The world outside smelled clean, as though washed of its sins. Ethan arrived early, his pickup splattered with mud. His plaid shirt was damp, collar open, revealing a faint scar along his collarbone, an old burn, puckered and pale. "You okay?" he asked. Laura nodded, holding up the blueprint. "I found something." Ethan leaned over the table, tracing a calloused finger along the lines. "This is beautiful," he said. He was building more than walls here. His voice softened. "You could do it, you know. The town could use a place like this." "I don't even have a roof that doesn't leak," she replied, half laughing. Ethan hesitated, then said, "I might not have much, but I know people who will help. We all owe this town something." His smile didn't quite reach his eyes. Later, as he packed up his tools, Laura noticed a slip of paper fall from his pocket, an overdue medical bill. He reached for it quickly, embarrassed. "My mom," he said, voice tight. "She's not doing great. Hospital wants payment for her care. I'll figure it out." That night, as Laura sat by the window, she couldn't shake the image of Ethan's weary eyes. She wanted to help him, the way Daniel would have helped anyone in need, but money was something she had none of. Then her gaze fell on Max, who lay snoring beside the door. His head rested on her old stethoscope, the one she'd used for years in her clinic. An idea began to form. By the next week, Laura had converted the old shed behind the cabin into a small mobile veterinary clinic. With Max as her emblem, painted proudly on a wooden sign that read, "The Shepherd's Haven, Care for All Creatures," she began visiting farms and homes across Willow Creek. Word spread quickly. People paid what they could, often in food, supplies, or simply gratitude. Ethan helped her retrofit an old van with shelves and lighting. Noah learned to mix plaster for wounded hooves. Lily painted signs and helped wash strays. One evening, a crowd of neighbors arrived at her cabin, bringing planks, nails, and hot soup. Together they repaired the roof, replaced windows, and built a new fence. The air was filled with laughter, the sound of hammers, and the steady rhythm of rebirth. As twilight settled, Laura stood with Ethan by the creek, watching fireflies dance above the water. "You've changed this place," Ethan said quietly. Laura smiled. "No, this place changed me." But as she turned toward the cabin, her eyes caught a glimmer beneath the water again, the same strange light she'd seen that first night. It flickered once, twice, then steadied, as if waiting for her to notice. And for the first time, she felt certain it wasn't just her imagination. Chapter 4. The Will and the Truth. The morning came with a brittle chill that lingered in the air long after sunrise. Mist coiled around the trees of Willow Creek like silent ghosts, and Laura found herself staring at the faint shimmer beneath the water that had appeared again at dawn. That same strange light, rhythmic and pulsing, before it faded as the sun rose. She had almost convinced herself it was just the reflection of the sky until today. Today, the world would give her something tangible, something far heavier than mystery. The phone on the kitchen wall rang, a jarring sound against the stillness of morning. Laura wiped her hands on a towel and answered. "Mrs. Whitman." The voice was firm, professional, belonging to a woman accustomed to control. "My name is Clara Monroe. I'm an attorney from the firm Hollis & Bright in Raleigh. I represent the estate of Daniel Whitman. I believe it's time we spoke." 3 hours later, a dark sedan appeared on the gravel road, its polished surface out of place among the modest homes of Willow Creek. From it stepped Clara Monroe, a woman in her late 30s, tall and composed, with sharp cheekbones and skin the color of pale sand. Her black hair was drawn neatly into a bun, a streak of silver cutting through like a deliberate scar. She wore a gray suit, simple yet elegant. And her eyes, intelligent, cool, and slightly tired, scanned her surroundings like a detective assessing a crime scene. "Mrs. Whitman," she said, extending a gloved hand, "may I come in?" Inside the cabin, Clara set a briefcase on the table and clicked it open with practiced precision. "Your late husband," she began, "was the sole heir to the estate of Margaret Reynolds, his maternal grandmother. She established a trust valued at approximately $180 million. Laura's breath caught. The words felt absurd in the humble cabin, where the floorboards creaked and the wind whispered through the gaps in the walls. "That money was never mentioned," she said, voice unsteady. "Daniel never lived like a man with that kind of wealth." Clara's expression softened, just slightly. "That was by design. According to the terms of the trust, the inheritance would only activate upon certain conditions: independence from the Whitman family's financial influence, demonstration of moral integrity, and evidence of raising your children according to values of empathy, service, and humility." She slid a document across the table. Daniel's signature was there, elegant and familiar. "He believed you would meet those conditions. You already have." Laura sat frozen. Max, sensing her unease, rested his muzzle on her lap. The warmth of his fur grounded her as the enormity of it sank in. "He planned all this," she whispered. "He knew what would happen." "Yes," Clara said quietly. "Your husband anticipated his family might attempt to control the future of his children through wealth. He wanted to ensure that you, and only you, could protect what mattered most." By the time Clara left, the afternoon light had turned amber, spilling like honey across the creek. But the peace didn't last long. 2 days later, a black limousine appeared at the edge of the property. Laura's stomach sank before she even saw who stepped out. Evelyn Whitman emerged in a long camel coat, her silver hair immaculate as always. Her posture so rigid it seemed carved from marble. Yet, there was something different about her this time, a fragility behind the mask of power. "So it's true," Evelyn said as she approached. "My son left everything, all of it, in your hands." Laura didn't answer. Evelyn's eyes flicked toward the cabin, toward the freshly painted sign that read, "The Shepherd's Haven." "You've turned his memory into a charity project," she said bitterly. "He could have rebuilt the Whitman legacy. Instead, he left us this." Laura's voice was calm, but her hands trembled slightly. "He didn't want to rebuild walls, Evelyn. He wanted to build bridges." The confrontation might have ended there if not for the small crowd that began to gather, neighbors, children, and a few local reporters who had come after word of Laura's mobile clinic spread. Among them stood Ethan, arms crossed, face unreadable but protective. "You've got an audience," he murmured to Laura. "Might as well show them what this fight is really about." Laura nodded, took a breath, and turned to Evelyn. "Come with me." They walked down the dirt path behind the cabin to a small wooden barn converted into an art studio. Inside, children from the town were gathered around long tables covered with paints, brushes, and scraps of paper. Lily stood at the front, her curls tied back, teaching a little boy how to mix colors. "We call it the Willow Workshop," she said shyly when she noticed Evelyn. "We paint things that make us happy." Max lay near the door, tail thumping softly every time a child passed. Evelyn hesitated, her eyes scanning the walls. Paintings hung everywhere, bright, hopeful depictions of families, animals, rivers, and hands. One, framed and placed at the center, drew her attention. It was Lily's work, Grandpa's hands building dreams. The painting showed a pair of strong, weathered hands, Daniel's, lifting beams of wood beneath a sky full of light, while children played in the background. Evelyn's breath hitched. Her lips parted, but no sound came. She reached out as though to touch the canvas, her manicured fingers trembling. He used to draw like that as a boy," she murmured, "always building something with his hands." Laura said nothing, the silence between them filled with the distant hum of the creek and the laughter of children. Then, softly, Evelyn's composure cracked. Her shoulders sagged, and for the first time in years, she looked simply human. Not a matriarch, not a guardian of wealth, but a woman who had lost her son and was finally beginning to understand what he had stood for. "I thought money could keep us safe," Evelyn whispered, "that it could buy back the years we lost. I was wrong." Her eyes glistened. "He would have been proud of you." Laura's throat tightened. "Then honor him with us," she said, "not through control, but through kindness." Outside, the sky cleared, and sunlight streamed through the windows, catching the faint shimmer of dust in the air, dust that looked, for a fleeting second, like golden rain. And by the creek, the mysterious light appeared once more, steady and unwavering, as if blessing the fragile peace between two women who had finally stopped fighting the same ghosts. Chapter 5. The Haven of Hearts. 2 years later, Willow Creek no longer looked like the forgotten town it once was. The rusted fences had been replaced by flower beds, the roads swept clean, and the air carried laughter where silence used to settle. On the hill overlooking the creek stood a new building, elegant yet humble, built from reclaimed wood and sunlight. The sign above the entrance read, Whitman Haven Center, Tanin, a place to heal, create, and belong. Laura stood by the doorway, her auburn hair now streaked faintly with silver, tied back loosely beneath a wide-brimmed straw hat. Her skin had tanned from long days outdoors, her hands bearing faint scars from hammers, ropes, and brushes. At 44, she carried an air of quiet strength, the kind born not from certainty but endurance. She adjusted a bouquet of wildflowers on the front table as children's laughter drifted through the halls. Inside, the walls were alive with color. Paintings from the art classes Lily taught lined the corridors, pictures of rivers, stars, and hands reaching for light. The veterinary wing smelled faintly of antiseptic and hay, where Noah, now 13, worked alongside his mother, bandaging the paw of a stray dog. His freckles had darkened, his arms longer, voice deeper, though he still smiled with the same earnestness that reminded Laura painfully of Daniel. Ethan Brooks approached from across the yard, his flannel sleeves rolled up, clipboard tucked under one arm. His hair had grown a little longer, peppered with gray near the temples. The burn scar on his collarbone had faded, now barely visible beneath the tan. He still moved like a man accustomed to caution, but there was lightness in his steps that hadn't been there before, a peace hard-earned. "You've got a full crowd," he said with a crooked grin. "Half the county came to see you cry at the ribbon cutting." Laura laughed softly. "I'm not crying, not yet." "Well, don't start until after I finish my speech. I'm bad enough at public speaking without tears involved." Ethan's mother, Mrs. Brooks, sat near the garden, wrapped in a shawl the color of lilacs. Though her memory wandered more often now, she smiled warmly as children passed by. Her once sharp eyes had softened, clouded but kind. She had been the first to call Laura's clinic a place where broken things remember how to mend. And standing a little apart from the crowd was Evelyn Whitman, unrecognizable from the woman who had once turned her daughter-in-law into the rain. She wore a soft blue dress instead of her usual tailored suits, her silver hair loose around her shoulders. The severity in her eyes had melted into something gentler. She now volunteered at the center twice a week, teaching literacy to elderly residents and organizing donations. In her hands, she held a small golden locket, engraved with Daniel's initials. The ceremony began under a sky brushed with the pinks and golds of Shah. Early evening, a band of local musicians played on the porch while children sat cross-legged in the grass, some sketching the scene. Ethan tapped the microphone, clearing his throat awkwardly. "I was going to read something official," he began, "but Laura says speeches should come from the heart, not from a clipboard." A ripple of laughter passed through the crowd. "So, here it is. This center isn't just a building, it's a promise. One started by Daniel Whitman, carried forward by the woman who refused to give up on his dream, and kept alive by everyone here who believed in second chances." Laura's throat tightened as applause broke out. She looked toward Evelyn, who gave a small nod, eyes glistening. Then, with steady hands, Laura took the ceremonial scissors and cut the ribbon. The crowd cheered. Noah whooped. Lily threw petals into the air, her curls catching the last of the sunlight. Amid the joy, Max stood by the porch, older now, his once dark fur threaded with silver, muzzle almost entirely white. His gait was slower, but his spirit unchanged. Children gathered around to pet him, and he endured it all with patient dignity, tail thumping lazily. To them, he was a legend, the shepherd of Willow Creek, the dog who had guarded the haven from its first day of construction to its last nail hammered in. As the sun dipped lower, music and laughter faded into gentle conversation. Laura slipped away to the porch where the old wooden box, Daniel's box, rested beside a potted fern. Her fingers brushed its surface, the grain smooth and familiar. She opened it. Inside was the letter she had carried through every storm, written in Daniel's steady hand. If you're reading this, it means you found the home we dreamed of. Not built with stone or wealth, but with love and courage. Don't mourn what we lost. Celebrate what we became. Our home was never a house, Laura. It was every heart you've healed. Her eyes stung. The wind moved through the willows, carrying the faint scent of rain and memory. Ethan came to stand beside her, saying nothing. He simply placed his hand over hers, grounding her. Below, the twins ran with the children, their laughter echoing across the field. Evelyn watched from a bench, smiling through tears. Laura folded the letter, tucking it against her heart. "We did it, Daniel," she whispered. As twilight deepened, Max lay down by the porch steps. His head rested on his paws, eyes half closed. Fireflies drifted over the grass, their glow mirrored in the water below. Laura glanced down at him, his breathing slow, steady. When the breeze lifted, rustling through the willows, Max's tail gave one final wag, soft as a sigh. Somewhere in the distance, a night bird called. The light beneath the creek flickered once more, steady and serene, as if the spirit of what they'd built would keep shining long after they were gone. Sometimes the greatest miracles don't come with thunder or shining lights. They come softly, in the quiet strength to forgive, to rebuild, and to keep believing when the night feels longest. Laura's journey reminds us that God's grace is not always about wealth or reward, but about renewal, about finding light in the ruins, love after loss, and purpose in pain. When we choose compassion over pride, forgiveness over anger, and faith over fear, we open a space in our lives where miracles can dwell. Just as Laura found her haven of hearts, each of us can build our own, not from stone, but from kindness, courage, and trust in God's will. In every act of goodness, He is there. In every storm we survive, His hand is guiding us through. So if this story touched your heart, share it. Maybe someone you love needs to be reminded that hope is never truly gone. Tell us in the comments, have you ever seen God's hand at work in an unexpected way? Like, share, and subscribe to spread more stories of faith, love, and resilience. And may the Lord bless you and your family with peace, strength, and gentle miracles in every ordinary day.